Alrighty. Oof. Apologize if I look like I just woke up. Totally did just wake up. I work night shift, so I wasn't entirely sure if I was going to teach this class because I'm the backup, and it still technically doesn't list me as teaching it, but here we go. All right.
Consider yourself informed.
So
We're happy to have you.
So for today's Jeopardy, here are the categories. We got METAR, terminal aerodrome forecasts, weather reporting, acronyms, acronyms, it's raining, it's pouring, and keep a close eye. And that's not working correctly. Absolutely fantastic. I mean, we can still sort of see it, right? Can I actually click on anything? So let's see if I can start with weather reporting for 100. I can. So we're just going to roll with that weirdness. How often are METARs issued? Sam.
Every hour.
Indeed. Or technically could be a specie as necessary. But yeah. All right. Okay. So because the ability to choose is not functioning, I am going to, from this point, go through these in order to and not have to choose. Because otherwise I will lose track of what we have picked. So I'm going to go for METAR for 100 next. What is the date and time that this one was issued? Michelle.
It was issued the 8th of the month at 03:56 Zulu.
That is correct. And we even get it highlighted. Beautiful. Alrighty. Next, we're going to go to terminal aerodrome forecast for 100. This would be way cooler if I had a way to actually record who was getting the points. What is the valid time of this TAF? Tatum.
From the 8th day at 400 Zulu to the 9th day at 600 Zulu.
Indeed. Right up there at the top of the TAF. All right. We already did weather reporting for 100. We're going to do acronyms, acronyms for 100. RA. What does RA stand for? Riley.
Rain.
It does indeed stand for rain. Specifically, if it is presented as just RA, it's actually moderate rain. If it is a minus in front, light rain. Plus in front, heavy rain. It's raining, it's pouring. What does the acronym PIREP stand for? Christopher, I love your cat, by the way.
Pilot report. Yeah, Hobbs is a menace.
But
he's funny. Pat Calvin is around here somewhere.
Looks like he's staring you down.
Yeah, that's his thing.
Pilot report is correct. Keep a close eye for 100. What type of weather is associated with air mets? Caitlin.
Weather that's light to moderate in severity, so it could be moderate icing, moderate turbulence, and then sustained surface winds of less than 30 knots, and it could be mountain obscurations as well.
That is correct. You actually went farther than this answer does, but all of what you said is correct. Mostly air mets are not going to be stuff that we use at the airlines, but we might use them in the case of like if an aircraft has a MEL that blocks them out from icing conditions, we can't fly into an icing air met. All right, let's go METAR for 200. What is the wind direction and speed in this METAR that we have seen before? Alan.
290 at 7 knots.
Yes. Is the wind coming from 290 or going to 290?
They're coming from 290.
Yes. Alrighty. Terminal aerodrome forecast for 200. What are the winds on the 8th day at 6 Zulu? Bethany.
Variable at 3 knots.
Indeed. And weather reporting for 200. How often are TAFs issued? This is for the US specifically. Brian.
Every 6 hours.
Yeah. It is worth noting that's a US thing. Not every country does that. For example, Canada, each airport issues TAFs at different times, and the TAF will say in it when the next one is. Acronyms. Acronyms for 200. BR stands for. Rebecca.
Missed.
It does stand for mist. Is that precipitation?
I would say no. Isn't a surface?
No, it is, the technical term is an obscuration. That is something that I've heard some places ask in interviews because a lot of people remember it as baby rain and they think of it as precipitation, but that is not correct. So worth noting in case you get that. It's raining, it's pouring for 200. Regarding PIREPs, what is the abbreviation for an urgent report? Lakeisha.
UUA.
It is indeed UUA. And where would we find that in the PIREP?
Very beginning.
Yes. Right at the start. Keep a close eye for 200. How long does an AirMet last? Take them.
6 hours.
It does indeed last for 6 hours. My normal follow-up would be to ask about SIGMETs, but I have a sneaking suspicion that's on here elsewhere, so I'm not going to ask that question. METAR for 300. What is the visibility in this METAR that we have now seen twice before? Nichelle.
5 statute miles.
It is indeed 5 statute miles. That's it's probably a real METAR, honestly. It's a very San Francisco type of weather. Terminal aerodrome forecast for 300. What is the sky condition on the 8th day at 15:59 Zulu? Brian.
Broken at 600 feet.
It is indeed broken at 600 feet. Because we are still in that 14 Zulu line. Brian, did you have something to add?
No, my computer is acting all wonky and slow, so.
Classic. This is also a very LAX TAF. I wouldn't be surprised if this one's real also. Although it does seem to clear up a little early in the day for LAX. Maybe it's summer. Alrighty, weather reporting for 300. Why would a Specie METAR be issued? Trevor.
There's some significant change to the weather since the last one was issued.
Indeed. Significant change in weather between scheduled reporting times. It is worth noting that significant has some specific definitions. For example, if the weather changes by 100 feet, if the ceiling changes by 100 feet, but that takes it from full VFR to marginal VFR, that will always be reported. Even if the change doesn't really feel significant. So significant can mean different things, but yes, that is the exact wording of the text. Acronyms, acronyms for 300. GR stands for. Brett.
Hail.
It is indeed hail. How's hail formed, by the way?
The ice that gets thrown up really high and freezes by an updraft and then falls back down and repeats that.
Sure does. All right. It's ringing, it's pouring for 300. Which direction is the wind blowing in this hurricane? Lakeisha.
Is it coming from the west?
It is indeed coming from 270, west to east. Alrighty, keep a close eye for 300. What type of weather is associated with SIGMETs? Caitlin.
Severe weather, so it could be severe turbulence, severe icing, widespread sandstorms, and even volcanic ash.
Yeah. Thunderstorms also. Hurricanes. Convective weather. It is worth noting that the convective SIGMET that the U.S. does not exist outside of the U.S. The rest of the world uses a thunderstorm SIGMET, which lasts a little longer. METAR for 400. What is our altimeter setting in this METAR? Arian.
3014.
It is indeed 3014. What units is that?
Millibar, is it right?
This is
Hectopascal.
inches of mercury.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah. But yeah, there are some places where you'll see that in millibar. .14. All right. Terminal aerodrome forecast for 400. What is our ceiling on the 8th day at 7 Zulu? Brian.
Excuse me. There is no ceiling.
That is correct. Our ceiling is indefinite. Alrighty, weather reporting for 400. How many times can a SPECI-METAR be issued in between the scheduled reporting times? Brett.
As often as they need to update the conditions.
Yep, sure can be, and I've seen it just a couple minutes apart in several cases. Happens a lot with rapid onset of fog, actually. That was weather reporting for 400, right? Sounds right. Acronyms, oh acronyms for 400. What does A02 stand for? Nichelle.
Automated station with precipitation discriminator.
It sure is. And most of them are at this point. It's raining, it's pouring for 400 is our daily double. And we'll see if this wants to display the question. There we go. Why do dispatchers avoid filing their planes into or around volcanic ash? Noah.
Because if it goes in the engine, it can turn into glass and make the engine inoperable.
Yep. We actually just had one going into Guatemala City the other day. There is a volcano down there, Fuego, that likes to go off just about every day. And usually the wind blows it away from Guatemala City. But that one day the wind happened to be blowing towards Guatemala City. So that was a entertaining moment while we tried to figure out if we could actually get in. Turned out that we could, as long as we stayed within 10 miles of the airport. But it was close. Yeah, so the ash turns to silica and is ingested into the engine, causing engine failure. It can also cause other things. It causes severe scouring on the outside of the aircraft. The windows can turn frosted. It causes a lot of damage. And we're going to keep a close eye for 400. How long does a SIGMET last? Trevor.
4 hours.
Except?
Except a convective signet, which is 2 hours.
Yes. Again, only a US thing, but yeah. Those actually will be the most common ones that you do see, though. METAR for 500 by actually a huge margin. Those are really common. What is our ceiling in this METAR? Gonna see if someone who hasn't answered yet wants to answer this one. Becky.
20,000.
It is indeed 20,000. Because few is not a ceiling, but broken is. So yeah, 20,000 feet is the ceiling. Alrighty. Terminal aerodrome forecast for 500. Do we require an alternate if we had an ETA of 1659 Zulu? And again, I'm looking for somebody that hasn't answered because we have enough of those to answer every question from here on out. Let's start our timer. When it runs out, I'm gonna call on somebody. Joseph.
We'll say no alternate needed.
Alrighty, why?
So 1659, hour before and after would be still a visibility of 6 statute miles.
So what is an hour before?
Hour before would be 15. Oh, but that'd still be 5 statute miles at 1559.
Well, actually, more problematically, the ceiling would be 600 feet.
Oh. All right.
So that one's a little sneaky. They like to give you questions like that. There's probably going to be a question that's sneaky like that on the quiz, if I had to bet. Something sneaky where it's like legal by 1 minute or requires an alternate by 1 minute or something like that. Because those are the ones where we can really show for sure how much you get on it. Because yeah, that's sneaky. Weather reporting for 500. 5 required items to be reported in a METAR. And it is worth noting that despite the wording of this, this is not what is required for it to be a valid METAR. This is what is required for us to use the METAR. And this is a quiz question, by the way. Feel free to get it wrong. I'm going to call on somebody to give me at least a couple. Alexander.
Give me the visibility. I'm just going to name some of them I remember. The date and time. The wind.
There we go. Okay.
And the station, right? I don't know. That's 4.
Yeah, we don't actually require the station in order to use this technically. We're just looking at weather items specifically. So wind direction, visibility, We're actually counting wind direction and speed as one item, even though that's totally two separate items, but whatever. Yeah. So what are the other things that we require outside of wind direction and speed and visibility? Can anybody think of some others?
Altimeter, temperature, dew point.
Yeah. There's one more.
Wind direction.
We already had that one, actually. Wind direction and speed.
Sky condition.
Sky condition is the last one, yeah. So I'm going to leave this slide up for a second. Feel free to note this down. These are the expected answers to that question. I will be honest, I think that question's a little unnecessarily tricky. But yeah, they're looking for the weather conditions in the METAR that we require to be reporting in order to dispatch. And these are those. Alrighty. Acronyms. Oh, acronyms for 500. BC stands for. That's a fun one. Nichelle.
Patches.
Yeah, patches or patchy. And specifically, it is, I don't think I've ever seen it applied to anything other than fog. I don't even know if it can be applied to anything other than fog. So you would see BCFG. So it'd be patchy fog. Already, it's raining, it's pouring for 500. And again, I'm going to look for someone who has not answered yet. I'll call on somebody. Free surface visibility restrictions. Kyrie. What are 3 surface visibility restrictions?
Would that be fog, smoke, and haze, or blowing?
Yeah, those are 3 options. There's many others. The ones that are listed here: fog, dust, sand, snow. But yeah, smoke and haze definitely also count. Blowing snow can do it. Even rain can do it, honestly. It's heavy enough. And keep a close eye for 500. What is the purpose of a weather observer?
To be able to anticipate upcoming thunderstorms, anything that needs an emergency METAR, a SPECI, anything of that sort?
It's not really to anticipate. It is a little more because, again, the weather observer is not the forecaster. The forecaster is not at the airport. Forecaster is in an office somewhere. Generally, I think there are a few exceptions, but generally the forecaster is in an office somewhere. So the weather observer is there to record the weather conditions every day at scheduled times. They also may augment the automated station. And I've seen many such examples of stations that were clearly augmented. You can actually tell which ones are being augmented and which ones are not, because there is a website that records the automated observation every 5 minutes. And that also includes the METAR. So you can clearly see when the METAR is including stuff that the automated observation isn't, or excluding stuff that the automated observation is including. Most commonly, this involves like changing the visibility a little bit based on what they actually see, landmarks that they're able to see. So yeah, they are there to record the weather conditions and augment the METAR. And final Jeopardy. Alrighty. What does this little bit represent at the end of our METAR that we have seen many times?
That's the exact temperature and dew point reading. 12.8 and minus 8.9 dew point.
It's just 8.9, but yes. If it was minus, there would be a 1 here after the first. After 128, it would have a 1 there in that first digit of the second bit. Alrighty. So that is all of that. Does anybody have any questions, things they feel they might need to review about weather, which is what the quiz will be on? Take them.
So it's not really about the material per se, but in that example, when you would need an alternate by 1 minute, in the real world, would you like delay by a minute, or would you add an alternate?
You would add the alternate. You'd kick people off for the alternate. There's basically no airline in the world that would prefer to take a delay as opposed to remove passengers. So that's what you would do if you had to do it, but in almost every circumstance you could have the alternate without needing to remove passengers. So you would add the alternate. It is worth noting that if you're within a certain amount, you might want to add the alternate even if it's not an hour. Like if you're an hour and 30 minutes out, especially not necessarily on the start, on the before end, but on the after end for sure. Because if you take a delay, then you're going to be coming back for more gas and you might have to kick people off and it'd be a whole thing. So I prefer to err on the side of caution with things that happen afterwards. But, when we're looking at morning fog, an hour before is fine. We're not going to be earlier than an hour, and the morning fog is pretty predictable in when it burns off. Thunderstorms, I'd be less sure about. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Alrighty. So I'm presuming that if I pull this up here, I pull up Akron, and I ask people to read out that specie at Akron, that everybody will know what this is that I've highlighted.
I'm blanking out on the first on the R23.
That is the runway.
Oh, it is. Okay. So plus 6,000 feet
Yeah, RVR on runway 2.
on the RVR. Okay.
Yeah. So it is greater than 6,000 feet. NIMBY, you can't be at my feet. I'm going to kick you by accident. That's not a good place to be. Alrighty, let's see. Anything else fun here? I remember we did a peak wind last time. So, another question about METARs. So when we have a remark here, we have varying visibility in the remarks. So visibility varying from 1 3/4 to 4, but we also have further up 2.5 miles noted. Which one of those two is controlling? Alan.
The 2.5 miles.
Yeah. So I think there's one exception for a specific type of visibility. I think it's tower visibility when we're doing takeoff minimums, but that's explained somewhere in the op specs. Other than that, yeah, the visibility in the remarks is never controlling. Now, RVR, if we had that, would be controlling. But that doesn't really come up too much for us when we're actually dispatching, just when we're flight following. When we're dispatching, RVR is never going to be in a TAF. Anything else fun? What is this condition right here? FZRA minus FZRA specifically.
It's freezing rain, light rain, freezing.
Yeah, light freezing rain is how that would be read. So that would be fun situation. What about this one here, FCFG?
Freezing fog.
Yep. Freezing fog. Anything else we can find that's fun? Does anybody know what this means? 280V340 after in between the winds and the visibility. Brett.
The wind direction is variable between 280 and 340.
That is correct. So that's going to be, our winds could be anywhere from 280 to 340. Anything else fun? What is this here? UP. Brian.
Unknown precipitation.
That is correct. And typically you're going to see that in winter weather. So it's some sort of wintry mix. The station isn't quite sure what it is. This is where having a weather observer comes in handy, because if you have a weather observer, they can tell you what exactly it is that's falling. But the automated station doesn't know. Oops. What is the intensity of this snow here? How heavily is our snow falling? Bethany.
Is it moderate?
It is moderate, yeah. So when you don't see the plus or the minus, it is moderate. This does not apply with obscurations. So like the freezing fog is just freezing fog. There can't be heavy or light freezing fog. Although, given that it's visibility a quarter of a mile, I feel like heavy might count. And do we know what this remark means here? CIG 006V010. Peter.
That means a variable ceiling between 600 and 1,000.
That is correct. And it's worth noting, by the way, that while this ceiling is also not controlling just like the varying visibility, those sorts of remarks are considered, the phrasing is pertinent. They are pertinent remarks. And if you are transmitting a METAR to a crew, you are required to include them. This was a contributing factor in a UPS accident at Birmingham. All right. So we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break here. And we'll come back at, I'll say 31 past the hour, just to be precise. Alrighty. So we're gonna do a small pop quiz here just for fun. I am meant to ask you about the primary and secondary flight controls and make sure we review that. So we have a certain flight control that is displayed in, that is circled in purple here along the leading edges of the wing. What is that flight control? And is it primary or secondary?
I think those are slats or secondary.
That is indeed the slats. Those are indeed secondary. What about this one that is outlined in yellow here? At the tail of the airplane. Sam.
That's the rudder.
That is the rudder. Is it primary or secondary?
Oh, it's a primary.
It is indeed primary. These ones might be a little hard to see. I'm going to zoom in a little further. We got these that are outlined in red along the top surface of the wing. What are those, and are they primary or secondary? Alrighty. If I cut out, we have these bits along the top of the wing. They are outlined in red. What are they, and are they primary or secondary? Trevor.
They're spoilers. The farthest ones out of the multifunction spoilerons, which on the CRJ-7 are technically primary, but otherwise they would be secondary.
They are both primary and secondary, yes. In the roll control function, the multifunction spoilerons deploy to help push down the downward wing. And on the ground and also in the air, they are also secondary flight controls. In the air, they deploy to add drag and reduce lift. And on the ground, they deploy to actually do the same thing, but they all deploy on the ground. Whereas in the air, whether in roll control or flight spoiler mode, only some of them will deploy. If I recall correctly, there are specific spoilers that are assigned specific functions. So I think only the inboard 2 will deploy as flight spoilers, and I think only the outboard 2 operate as roll control, but I could be wrong on that. But they all deploy on the ground. Alrighty, so we have a flight control. We have 2 flight controls at the tail. I'm going to talk about both of them at the same time. We have one control that moves the entire tailplane, the whole thing, and we have another control that moves just this bit at the back. What is each one, and is it primary or secondary? Brian.
One of them's gonna be the elevator, and that is primary, but honestly, I'm not sure which one is which. I don't know what the other one.
Alrighty. So the other one, so the elevator is the orange bit. So it's this bit at the back. The pink bit is going to be the stabilizer trim. So
okay,
that is a secondary flight control, which it has to deflect more than the actual elevator is capable of. It can also be called the elevator trim. It has to deflect more than the elevator is capable of because it is correcting for center of gravity changes throughout the entire allowable range of CG locations of the aircraft, which is quite a big range. So it has to be able to move quite a bit. This also means that if it breaks, it can overpower the elevators, which has been a factor in multiple crashes, and most infamously was responsible for the Boeing MCAS disaster. Anyway.
But the elevator is primary, right?
The elevator is primary, yes. Similarly, there's also rudder trim, and then there is trim for this control out here at the very edge of the wing that I have outlined in a light blue. What is that one? And is it primary or secondary? Peter.
I think we're looking there at the ailerons and their primary.
That is correct. Those are going to be the ailerons, and they are the primary flight control for roll control. Them and the multifunction spoilerons. And yeah, so there is also an aileron trim and a rudder trim to trim the aircraft in all phases of flight, but those ones are not nearly as strong because they don't need to account for center of gravity changes. And they're not used very often either. And what do we have here that is outlined in green at the back of the wing? Also, bits outlined in green underneath the wing are part of the same system.
Flaps.
Those are the flaps. Are they primary or secondary?
They are secondary.
They are indeed secondary. And also, fun fact, that's one of the things that the stabilizer needs to trim for. When the flaps deploy, stabilizer trim needs to move. Alrighty.
Does it auto trim? I know this is probably a little bit outside of our scope, but does it auto trim when you move the flaps? Okay.
I don't know exactly to what extent it does,
Yeah.
but my understanding is it does. I
Usually it gives it like a half what it needs just to
the
get it started.
737 is ancient, and the 737 auto trims when you move the flaps. So I'm pretty sure the CRJ does. The 737 is so old that there are versions of it that are called the Jurassic. It's not an official term, but alrighty. So first question, who knows what this is that we're looking at?
That is an IFR high chart based on the Q routes and the J routes.
IFR high en route. How much of this have you guys looked at so far?
We
It should have
went
been
over
maybe the
it
past
quite a
couple
bit.
days.
We went over it quite a bit yesterday.
Okay.
It was kind of our intro, but it was a deep dive intro.
Cool. So for me personally, I don't know if this exact situation happens with everybody on their practical, but it's common for you to be asked about a lot of the things that's on here. For me in my practical, literally the examiner brought up Sky Vector and started pointing at things and asking, what's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? So that's what I'm going to do with you now. And I'm going to see what you know, what you don't know, and see if we can fill in some gaps. So the first question is, there is this thing that is labeled as Lamar. What is that? Trevor.
That particular one is VOR DME.
It is. Do you know the service volume of it?
That one is 130 miles.
Yeah, at its highest point. So it's a VOR high and DME high also. What radial? So when you're on the J102, what radial should you be flying to get to or from Lamar?
.066.
Yes. So that's going to be this bit right here. So how far is it between Lamar here and Salina on J102? So it might be a little small, so I'm going to zoom in. Alan.
242 nautical miles.
That's correct. I was trying to see if I could trick you because we got the 201 here, but the 201 is just the distance between Salina and Riley here. And if you add that to the distance between Lamar and Riley, you get 243, which is close enough, rounding error. What is this little line that looks like the edge of a castle?
Looks like the changeover point between Denver and Kansas City Center.
That is correct.
For
That's the
radio
center
calls.
boundary, yeah. The exact changeover point's kind of fluid a little bit, but you'll usually change over before you cross the line. But yeah, that's the center boundary. And can also see in these boxes what frequency you're supposed to be on in each area. Again, those are the high frequencies. If you're on the low chart, it would be different frequencies. What type of nav aid are we looking at Salina here? Caitlin.
That would be a Vortac.
Yes. Can we use the tachyon portion of it?
I think so, unless there's a NOTAM.
We can use the DME part of it. We cannot use.
Oh, I thought you were saying because the military stuff. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah. But the tachyon does provide us with the DME. So we can use that part of it. But it's, I forget what the exact phrasing is. I think it's azimuth is the word that they use, is the other half of it, and we can't use that. How far is it from Wichita here, down here, Wichita Vortac, up to Judge? What would we see on the DME more specifically is, well, okay, no, that's not correct. How far is it is just the question. DME reading's not going to be exact.
$83 nautical miles.
It is indeed 83. So the way we know that is this bit in the box here measures the distance all the way out to Judge. Could also add 26, 19, 38. I'm not good enough at mental math to do that without a calculator, but you could also do that and you'd get pretty much the same answer. So Sprint here is not on this airway. It's a separate waypoint. How do we know that we have crossed Sprint if we happen to be navigating there for some reason? How do we know that we are at that waypoint? Or that intersection, technically. That's, yeah. Brian.
If let's see, if we have a DME, then we'll know from the what is that? What is that one up there? That Vortac there. Which one is it? Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know that. Well, what's the name of this big one up here at the top?
Kansas City?
Oh, that's Kansas City. Okay, I'm sorry. So if we have DME, we could tell, I guess, by the DME coming from Kansas City. But if we don't have DME, then it would be when we, if we're tapped in also to Topeka, when we reach the 124 radial.
Actually, it's both, because this is not actually on the airway. So it does require both. We require 124 radial at 34 DME from Kansas City, is how that point is defined. Because it's not on the airway, so it's not defined as, so like the airway is defined as the 190 radial off of Kansas City. This point is evidently not quite on that radial.
Oh, I see. Because the line,
they've chosen to take it off the airway for whatever reason. Yeah.
I
so
see.
it's not on the airway.
I got it. Yeah, so you'd have to have that Topeka.
Yeah. Dallin could maybe explain a little more about why that point might not be on the airway, but I personally have no clue. All right, here's a fun one. If it wants to load.
Hey, sorry, going back for a sec. You know it's not on the airway because there's no break in the airway.
Yes, because there's no break in the airway. There's no distance notation. So yeah, a few things. Also, if there was, this isn't always true, but if there was a break in the airway, it should state J60 on either side of the break, which it doesn't. It doesn't state the route number on either side of the point, so you can also tell it there. If it is like a crowded space, you might see it represented. I don't know if I can find one here, but you could see it represented as like a horseshoe shape around the point to clarify that it does not connect. But that's fairly rare to find on the charts, and I don't know where to find one to display you. But I do think we actually have one like that on the quiz, which is not this week's quiz, to be clear. That's next week's quiz. But so we have Woolback here. What type of nav aid is Woolback? Woolbach. I don't know how you pronounce that. Brett.
A DME.
It is indeed a DME. Alrighty. So what is white here? What do we call that? Arian.
It's a waypoint.
Yes, so that is a waypoint. It is on Quebec 92. And can we use it in this class?
I think we're using GPS routing.
Are we now using GPS routing? Okay. That would be new.
I guess my question. I guess it's more of a question for me. I don't think we are.
I don't think we are. No, we have not as long as I have worked here. So if we have started using those routes, that would be new.
I think they want us to just know what it is on the chart, that it's a key route and a high chart, etc. But not to use
you
them.
will absolutely use them when you actually dispatch, but in this class, we do not use those. Because allowing those would allow RNAV, which would allow you to just pick whatever route you feel like and not just go on airways. And that would cheapen the exercise of route building. Also worth noting, these points here, KP69 Charlie, KP66 Charlie, those are also waypoints. They are laid out in a grid across the US. They are perfectly valid and can be used in any RNAV flight plan. We can't use them in this class, but in cases where you are RNAV capable, those are just as valid as any other waypoint, even though they look a little different. Let's see. What is this airplane?
That's a great question. Looked at a lot of high charts and never even noticed one.
So I'm going to click off of the world high chart and show you the individual charts that this mosaic is made up of, and it might make more sense. Betty?
I think it's military aircraft.
It is not. I'll show you what it is. So if I click on en route H5 up here, and I go to the specific charts that it is made up of, you can see one half of that aircraft. If I go to en route L15, and the other half doesn't show up, that's fantastic. That completely destroys my point, because the point is, okay, it's en route H6 is the other half. There we go. There's the other half. So the point of what I'm saying is that these are the chart boundary. So the way that you would use these, if you had the chart, if you had the physical paper charts, what you would do is you would take those airplane symbols and you would match them up to create the full airplane, because they're half an airplane on each chart, and you create the full airplane, and then you would know that you have the charts matched up properly to display them. So this is also a good way to check, because sometimes around chart boundaries, some weird shenanigans, discontinuities in lines can happen in SkyVector, because SkyVector is a mosaic of these different charts. There is not just one blanket chart that displays the whole US. SkyVector is creating that. So if you happen to see one of these that looks really, really weird and is all screwed up, that's a good indication that the chart around it might be a little off. All right. This is a low altitude thing, but just for completeness, because it is displayed on the chart, what is this here? Borger. What is this navade?
Is that a decommissioned VOR?
It is not. That is just a TACAN. So when it is empty like that, that is the TACAN symbol. So we can only use that for DME. So it's like the same thing as the DME that we were looking at earlier, where it's just an empty box. When it's empty in the middle, we can only use it for DME. You can remember it that way. Does anybody know what the VOR MON is?
I think that's the minimum operational network.
Yeah. So what does that mean in practice?
I think since they're getting rid of a lot of the legacy VORs, they're saying those are the minimum VORs that they're going to upkeep and what's going to be used or available.
Yeah. So you actually see a really good example of that here in Liberal, Kansas, which, as far as I know, is not actually Liberal, but that's a separate point. So this all here, what is Q176, clearly you can see this is a high altitude VOR. Clearly this used to be a jet route. And on either side of it, when you get to Cimarron and over here to Wichita, it actually does become a jet route again. But this one bit here is now a Q route. and you have an overlaid waypoint Toto. Nice reference. Really great reference. Toto here instead of the Liberal VOR, and Toto is what's actually on Q176 here. But it's directly over the top of the VOR. So you see that they have created a Q route where a jet route used to be. That's that's the sort of thing that they're doing under the VOR MON. This VOR here is presumably going to be decommissioned when it stops working, whenever that is. All right. So there's a few fun things here. What is this symbol here on J244? There's another one of exactly the same type up on J8. Alexander.
Is that the changeover point?
That is the changeover point. Normally the changeover point would be halfway. If it should not be halfway, this is displayed. And that could be for reception issues or any sort of other issue. Yeah. So they're going to tell you to change over at 103 DME from Gallup up on this one. So you go down J8, 103 DME from Gallup is when you change over to Fort Union. And 80 DME in the reverse direction. Same thing here, 116 DME from Zuni, 86 DME from Fort Union is your changeover point. And while we're here, how can we identify that we have reached the Curly intersection? Zoom in on it a little more. Actually, I'm going to flip to en route H4 just so that it gets a little clearer. Trevor.
It's 26 DME from Albuquerque and on the 078 radial of whatever VOR that is to the west.
Yeah, Gallup. Zoom out one tick. So yeah, it can be on the 078 radial of Gallup, it can be on the 249 radial of Santa Fe, or on the 316 radial of Albuquerque there. So we got 3 different radials that are connecting that, and we have a DME. What do we require to identify an intersection? There are 2 options, actually. So our two options for identifying an intersection are we can use the radial of the VOR and the DME to locate us, or we can use two different VORs and intersecting radials if we are able to monitor two VORs at once. So if we have two VHF navigational radios, we are able to monitor two VORs and find this point off of two VORs. So we could use Albuquerque and Santa Fe for that. We could use Albuquerque and Gallup. We could use Gallup and Santa Fe. Doesn't really matter. All of those combinations work. Or we could use one of those, just one of those VORs and the DME off of Albuquerque. And that would be the minimum that we need to identify the point. In most cases, in the modern world, you are going to be identifying things with one VOR and DME, but dual VOR points are still common, especially on approaches, which is a nice segue into reading approach charts. So this one, I know I've showed to you before. So we have our localizer distance array approach into runway 19er at St. George, which is very nice. Comes down the valley. Does anybody know what the difference is between a localizer distance array LDA approach and an ILS approach? There's actually a couple differences. Arian.
Is there a precision and non-precision approach?
Yeah, although, well, technically this one has a glide slope. So our technical definition of this particular approach, because it has a glide slope, but it is not a precision approach, is this is what we call an approach providing vertical guidance, or APV. There's a number of RNAV approaches that do this. This is, as far as I know, the only non-RNAV approach that does that, that falls into that category. So the other difference is the offset. So the LDA is going to be offset by more than 3 degrees laterally from the center line of the runway. An ILS can be offset by up to 3 degrees. When it is offset by more than that, it becomes an LDA. In terms of physical equipment, it's pretty much the exact same thing. I believe there are some slight differences in calibration requirements and all of that. But otherwise, it's basically the exact same thing. This is just an ILS that is offset by more than 3 degrees. But it is not a precision approach. And as such, even when you are looking at the full LDA with glide slope, it has higher minimums. The lowest, if you had an ILS that was offset by 3 degrees, you could go down to 250 feet. If you had an ILS that was fully aligned with the runway, you could go down to 200-foot ceilings, is the lowest it could go. Here, this is still pretty good, but you're not getting that. And obviously, without the glide slope, the minimums are absolutely atrocious. So if we were on the approach without the glide slope, the full non-precision approach, at what point all the way down the approach do they go missed? Well, at what point must they go missed if they don't see the runway on that approach? Arian?
Is that an MAP?
Yeah, what is the missed approach point on this? What is the MAP?
Um, is it IXEKE?
Yeah. And this is where this point stretches the. Technically, these point names are supposed to be pronounceable. I challenge you to find anybody who can pronounce that. That is definitely stretching the validity of that definition. Whew. Yeah, so if we are on the non-precision approach, we are required to go missed at that point. The reason why, by the way, is if you look at the notes, the chart notes say the localizer is unusable inside 0.7 DME, and Exeki, I don't know, is at 0.7 DME. So we're going missed at that point because we can't use the localizer at that point. And the reason why the localizer can be unusable at that point is that's where you should be turning to the final approach course anyway, because this is offset by 7 degrees, so you have to make a turn to line up. And that's where you should be doing that. So you should be going missed if you can't see the runway at that point. So yeah, this is literally just an ILS that is offset by 7 degrees with some extra shenanigans. All right, so we're going to take a break here for 15 minutes. We're going to come back at 30 past the hour or 2:30 Zulu. Alrighty. How was everybody's break? Doesn't sound like it was bad, at least. Alrighty. So, what's an airport people want to look at charts for? Just shout one out if you're interested in a specific airport to look at charts. Fort Lauderdale, sure. Alrighty. So, see if I can phrase this ideally. What navigational equipment do we require to be operational in order to perform the ILS approach to runway 10 left at Fort Lauderdale here? What equipment must be operational on our aircraft? Rebecca.
DME or radar?
Yeah, so what specifically does that mean? So the DME obviously is a specific thing. If we don't have that, how do we know that we have radar? So have you guys learned about ATC transponders yet? Okay. So the aircraft is equipped with a piece of equipment that is called a transponder. So the most common, the requirement is mode C. You may see that referred to in certain places. I believe the modern one actually now is called mode S, but mode C is the legal requirement. So what this does is it reports the flight information to ATC at a more frequent rate. So when ATC uses primary radar, they are only getting the location of your aircraft. They cannot see what aircraft it is. They cannot see your altitude. They cannot see what speed you are moving at. They can only see a blip on the screen. That is it. When you have a transponder, they are able to see your flight number, your squawk code, which is a code that they assign you, or if you have an emergency, you can switch it to the emergency squawk code. They have your altitude, and they have your speed. So that is what is called secondary radar. And despite the name, it is actually primarily what is used to track aircraft by ATC. If you know ADSB, they also use that, but that's not their preferred method. ADSB is what we use as dispatchers to track aircraft, though, mostly. Some airlines are able to pay enough to get a feed of radar data from the FAA, but not everyone. And other feeds as well. So like satellite stuff. So we require our transponder to be operational or DME to be operational. We also require the ILS receiver to be operational because it's an ILS approach. So if we had the ILS receiver inoperative, we couldn't do this. If we had the DME receiver inoperative, we could if we had the transponder operating, which honestly we should, because if we ever have both transponders, because there are 2 transponders on the aircraft. So if one of them is gone, we can still use the other one. If both of them are out, we have to already get authorization from ATC to fly the route in the first place. So we better have a transponder. Christopher?
Is this a typical question for the practical? As in, they'll ask you a question like that. You have, instead of, I mean, of course, it says DME or radar required, but they want you to go further and describe. I mean, like you know, it says what kind of approach it is, so you know you need the equipment for that type of approach, etc.
Not necessarily, but they might include an MEL, like the ILS equipment is inoperative, and you'd be expected to know what that means.
Okay.
That's the real reason why I'm talking about it, is because like on the practical or on a practice flight plan, it's typically going to be approached from the other direction. You have a MEL or something that makes one of those pieces of equipment inoperative, and you're expected to look at the chart and read the notes and know that you can't do that approach.
What
with
about
that thing
for
inoperative.
what about for NOTAMs, for example, the ALS?
That
Questions
is
like that, I suppose.
Yeah, so that's an additional thing that you would add. So like if the ILS is inoperative, then we can't use that. If the DME is inoperative, then we require the transponder. If terminal radar service is NOTAMed inoperative, then we require the DME. So that's very rare, but I have seen on occasion that actually get NOTAMed out. So yeah, that's sort of just I don't want to read the MEL book, but I want to talk about what MELs do. Because I did that last time. I went through the MEL book, and that was boring. What is our highest obstacle around the airport? For this approach, anyway. Like in the airport vicinity, there's a few obstacles. Which one is highest?
That one with the curved arrow, 1049.
Yeah, so there's actually 2 that are exactly the same, but yeah. So that's how you would identify it quickly, is you would look for this arrow, and that's going to be your highest obstacle. The other way you can check your work on that is if you look at the minimum sector altitude up here, the MSA, that's typically going to be 1,000 feet above that obstacle. Now, that's not always true, but that's typically how it's going to be. Like if you have terrain, it's going to be 1,000 feet above the terrain. Now, given that this is Florida, do you think that is terrain or a building that is 1,000 feet above the ground?
It's not
A building.
terrain.
Yeah, that's not going to be terrain. So, interestingly, for the localizer approach, we can perform the localizer approach without DME. What are our minimums if we are doing the localizer approach and the DME is either NOTAM'd unserviceable or doesn't work on our aircraft? Assume everything else is working. Trevor.
Minimums are 1.25 miles and 600 feet.
Yeah, so we are in the without PACI column. Why are we in the without PACI column?
Because the little black, the one with the black box says DME required for the other one.
That is correct. And if we look at the chart here, we can see why PACI requires DME. Does anybody have any ideas why PACI requires DME?
It's the only one that can't be located using that other VOR, the DHP.
Yeah. I don't know what VOR that is, but yeah, that's the other ones. Holid, GAMV, War, Nove can all be identified off of this VOR DHP. PACI cannot. I'm trying to figure out under what circumstances we would use the alternate missed approach fix. Oh, it's because so the missed approach requires the Fort Lauderdale VOR here. Fort Lauderdale VOR 090 radial. If we don't have the Fort Lauderdale VOR or the Fort Lauderdale DME, we can use an alternate missed approach procedure that goes off the DHP VOR. And again, if we don't have DME on that one to identify ZMAV, we can pick up Palm Beach VOR. So if we were deriving alternate minimums for this airport, and we wanted to derive it off of just the ILSs, how would we know that they count as separate approaches? Brian.
If they have different localizers.
Yeah, so it's going to be the identifier up here. So here we have IUDL for 28 right, and then 10 left is ILHI. So that's two different identifiers. So they are functionally different approaches. 10 right has IFLL. 28 left has IADI. So those are different approaches. Now, an interesting thing is that 10 left is the only one that actually has 200.5 minimums. So even if we did have two ILSs, the best that we would be able to get is off of 28 left here, 401.25 for our alternate minimums would be the best that we can get, because this is the next best that we have. I am kind of curious why this is 250-foot altitude, but I don't know. Probably too close to the obstacles. Oh, there's a 310-foot antenna like right there. I'm kind of surprised they're even allowed to make an approach that goes like right over that antenna. That's wild. And what's the reason for this one being 200 foot? Oh, that's 200 foot. Okay. But this one's 250. Because there's a 250-foot obstacle somewhere up here. Now, I have no idea what obstacle is 250 feet out in the water there. Like if that's a shipping channel or something, maybe. Typically, what you see for ships is, I'll show you Boston here. Boston's kind of famous for this. When control tower reports tall vessels in approach area, there's separate minimums for if there's tall ships. It also blocks out vessels taller than 144 feet. So tall vessels means 144 feet or less. But realistically, that's pretty much all you're going to see in that particular shipping channel. I think Philly also has something like this. There's a couple other airports that have something like it, where basically you have ships in the approach area potentially, and they have separate minimums for that. So I don't know, maybe Fort Lauderdale just decided that we just assume there's a 250 foot tall ship this far offshore. Call it good. I don't know. No, back to Fort Lauderdale. So on this Fortal 9 arrival, what are our transitions that are available for this star?
Petersburg and Sarasota.
Yes. Also, technically, if you wanted to, you could also use Fortal as a transition. You can always use the point that the star is named after. This is also true for SIDS, but ATC might not be happy with it, so use it at your own risk. But there are some ATC preferred routes, ATC pref routes as they're called, that do actually use that.
Yeah, if you just boomed into Fortal, you'd probably get to practice your holding skills for a little bit.
Yeah, I think the situation in which you would use Fortal is if you're coming from Fort Myers. Like if you're doing Fort Myers to Fort Lauderdale, you'd use Fortal because you don't want to go north to go south. But they would want you on a star. So that'd be how you would do it. Let's see. Do they have an explanation of which runways? So, Fort Lauderdale, among several other airports, there are, when you are using RNAV departures, this is a thing in the real world. This is not a thing we use in this class, but in the real world, when you are using certain departures, you will get a certain runway based on the departure that you are using. You can find that information when it exists in this RNAV departure attention all users page. This is just a note for practical dispatching purposes. So you can see here, this has a list of the various departures and what runway they would go out of. So if we're not using an RNAV departure, we would be limited to the Fort Lauderdale 2 SID, which is that certainly is fun to read. I wonder. I have a sneaking suspicion. No, because this is just FLL2. So this wouldn't be a departure that you could use out of Miami. So why the hell's Dolphin on here? That's weird, man. So what are our transitions here on the Fort Lauderdale 2 departure? There's a lot of them. So I'm just going to ask, what are the ones off of the Fort Lauderdale VOR? Ignore all the ones that come off of Dolphin here. Just the ones off of Fort Lauderdale VOR.
What makes it a transition? Is it the last waypoint at the end of the star?
Not necessarily. So in this case, I think Fort Lauderdale would count as a transition because the state is named after it. But also, you see here, Felix is a transition. FLL2.Felix is how you can tell. They're also listed in darker, like if you look at it, it's like a bold font as opposed to the other ones.
The box at the top also lists which are for east and west departing aircraft and gives the frequencies. So it lists out different transitions.
Yeah.
Or, the box to the left of the each transition will be labeled, like you said, like FL2.Felix or Beach.
Yeah. So off of Fort Lauderdale, our transitions are HROC, ARPS, Felix, and Freeport, and Beach. And then also probably Fort Lauderdale. Although, again, you don't really want to follow that. So up here, we have, so these are the frequencies that are used for each departure. So ARPS, Be Nice, Doral, Freeport, Frisbee, HROC, or Beach if Fort Lauderdale is departing west is 12605. Manor or Beach if Fort Lauderdale is departing east are 126.85. So that's how you would read that. So there's also a speed restriction. We got to be able to accelerate to 250 knots within 7 nautical miles of departure. CRJ doesn't have great climb performance, but it can definitely do that. So that should be fine. It's also worth noting in these like restrictions and notes and stuff, when you're looking at these sorts of departures, you got to pay attention to if they are, especially for non-RNAV departures, if they are for propeller or turboprop aircraft only. In the modern day, it's very common for most or all of the non-RNAV departures and arrivals to be for turboprops or propeller aircraft only, because they're expecting all of the jets to have RNAV. I think we still use old charts for this particular course. So the charts that are in your drive, I believe, are somewhat older, and so they contain more non-RNAV charts than exist today. All right. So that's a departure. That's a very complicated looking departure too. Our highest obstacle here is Tower, a little south of Miami Executive. Alrighty. So let's switch over to Nogams. I don't really want to do Fort Lauderdale. Who wants to give me another airport and we can look at Nogams? Because I know Fort Lauderdale has a really long, complicated list that I don't really want to bother reading through. LVK. Actually, let me just, okay, a little more so that I know what LVK actually is. All right. So we have some airspace Nogams for unmanned airspace, unmanned aircraft. Who wants to read me this NOTAM here? Really, nobody wants to read the NOGAM. Alrighty. Joseph, do you want to read the NOTAM?
Okay, I'll give it a shot. So, man. I might have missed the class where we went over it, but I'm seeing on 0119, there's the traffic management program alert about the Super Bowl. So you need clearance for that. That's basically what I'm seeing.
Yeah, so there's going to be a traffic management program. So we would want to review the ATC advisories for this particular one, because there's going to be an ATC advisory about it. So that's when you see service traffic management program alert, you're going to want to go look at ATC advisories. I can go ahead and pull that up right now. So there's nothing up here, but there should be something in advisories somewhere. Maybe not necessarily today, but presumably at some point there was one. This one might be a little bit farther back because they're probably not going to refresh it as often. So it might actually be pretty hard to find this one. So I'm gonna not bother, but somewhere they've issued an advisory about this. I don't really care personally enough to find it, to be completely honest. I don't really care too much. There's a letter to Airman about it, so we can read that. So due to the high volume of traffic expected at San Francisco area airports for Super Bowl 60, parking reservations are highly recommended. Reservations can be made by contacting your preferred FBO. When making a reservation, provide the FBO with the requested date and time of arrival. Arrival reservations will be issued as close to the requested time as possible, depending on availability. Because of the anticipated demand during this period, flights without reservations run the risk of not receiving FBO services at the intended airport. So the FBO is fixed base operator. That's going to be the place that chartered flights and private jets and anybody that's not going to a terminal. I don't even think this airport has a terminal, or to their own parking spot that they own or rent at the airport. Anybody that's not based at the airport or going to the terminal uses the FBO. All right. So what about this one here? Who wants to try and read this particular NOGAM? Bethany.
I can try. I don't remember what the 02009 means, but I think for the ILS 25 right, the glide path is unusable.
That is correct. What times?
From February 7th at is it just 6 o'clock or no? Like 6 after midnight. To February 13th to 11:59 local.
No, that's still Zulu time, but that's an estimated time.
Oh,
so it could
no,
go longer.
yeah, you're right. I forgot about that.
And this bit means the 9th NOGAM of the second month, so 9th NOGAM of February. This is what we call the domestic NOGAM format. And also flip it to the ICAO format, which I'm going to teach because at some point, theoretically, this should have happened by now. The FAA was supposed to switch to the ICAO format like 6 months ago. And even that deadline had been pushed back for years. So they're supposed to have already switched to this. And at some point in the near future, they will actually do this. So the ICAO format is also worth knowing. Now, I will be completely honest that I don't remember what the letter codes mean. They have a specific meaning. I don't remember what they all mean. I do know that Q is basically like that's like filing information. So you don't need to know basically any of the Q stuff. A is the airport. And I'm guessing B and C are the start and end times. Because as you can see, they're the same time format. just split up so that they're not one after the other. And then E is the condition. In this case, the ILS runway 25 right glide path is unserviceable. So basically the same thing, just a slightly more extended format. Some people find this easier to read. Some people find this easier to read. It really depends on your personal preference. The ICAO format is what every other country uses. And at some point, the US will start using that too. So this one, I don't expect you guys to know what this is, so I'm going to read this one. So this is at Livermore. The filing location was Livermore. 7th NOTAM in the second month. The actual location is also Livermore. Runway 25 right, the runway alignment indicator light is unserviceable. So this is part of the approach legging system. Now, I personally do not recall whether this technically counts as inoperate, as the entire approach lighting system being inoperative. I would, however, consider that it is inoperative because this is the most visible part of the approach lighting system. So this is what's known as the rabbit because of how when they used to race dogs, dogs would chase like a rabbit, and this looked enough like that, I guess. So it's these lights that sequentially light up one after the other, and they lead the aircraft into the runway. And it runs down toward the runway and then starts again. So it's just looping back and forth. I wonder if I can find a GIF of this. That's not useful. Well, I can't really find a good little GIF of this. You should be able to, you'll probably see it in person when you go to St. George, because St. George has this on their approach lighting system. So they'll be able to show it to you, what it looks like from the ground, at least. But yeah, this is a critical part of the approach lighting system. I would consider it to have, I would consider the approach lighting system inoperative while this NOTAM is active. And this NOTAM is active at present. So it's from the 6th of February, 2026 at 4:45 Zulu to the 13th of February, 2026 at 23:55 approximately. So all of them are approximate in that they could end early. When it says EST, that means it is approximate in that it could run later as well. Most commonly, you see this with things like full airport closures. Like if there's, in the cases where there have been accidents at airports that I've been operating to, literally every single time they've closed the airport, and the closure time when it reopens has had a EST on it because they don't know for sure how long it's going to take. So here, this is probably also Super Bowl related. Aerodrome airport closed to non-scheduled transient GA aircraft except 24-hour prior permission required. This is the number that you call. from the 4th at 15 Zulu to the 10th at 2 Zulu. Almost read that as the 21st, but that's not correct. That's the 10th. A sneak. Those times are sneaky. They'll get you, even if you're used to it. And then we also have a NOTAM here. It's the first NOTAM of February. Livermore Airspace CFDC 6/9552 Oakland 99.7 security. So this is a TFR. So it's going to be for the Super Bowl. So there's going to be a temporary flight restriction for the Super Bowl. I wonder, it should show up on this page. Yeah. All right. So this is where we look for that. This is the page sua.faa.gov. Special SUA stands for Special Use Airspace. Relatively easy to remember. And when you click on one, it pops up this entirely new window. I mean, this is a pretty old site. It's not very good. And the NOTAMs, the TFRs are even worse because holy crap are they long. They are unreasonably long, these things.
Out in Chat GPT.
So, but what is typically allowed, and I can't highlight it, but you can kind of see it here. All aircraft operations within 10 nautical mile radius areas listed above, known as the inner cores, are prohibited except for approved law enforcement. Yeah. Approved law enforcement, military aircraft, approved air ambulance flights, and this is the part where we fall into, regularly scheduled commercial, passenger, and all cargo carriers operating under one of the following TSA-approved standard security programs procedures. Aircraft Operator Standard Security Program, AOSSP, Full All Cargo Aircraft Operator Standard Security Program. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. Model Security Program, MSP, 12.5 Standard Security Program, All Cargo or All Cargo International Security Procedure, ACISP, and are arriving into and or departing from 14 CFR Part 139 airports. So, because we are operating under ATC control, because we are operating under TSA-approved security programs, we can operate into and out of these TFRs. This is true for pretty much every TFR out there. There are a few that we cannot. So, you got to be careful with it, but generally this is the case that we can do this. I don't remember which specific security program it is that we operate under. I think it's AOSSP, but I know it's one of the TSA programs, so we're totally fine. So yeah, that's how you find the TFRs. They also do these for presidential visits to places. I don't know if there are any of those that are active recently. No, not really. So, yeah. but yeah, presidential TFRs are the same. Presidential TFRs are going to say, if you're operating under TSA control, you're good, basically. Or possibly, depending on whether it's the inner or the outer, you might just have to be talking to ATC, but we're doing that too. Alrighty, so who wants to give me, well, actually, hold on. Let's take a break here, and then we can come back with this. So let's come back at 33 past. All right. So, why don't we pick another airport to look at NUGMs for? Who wants to give me an airport? Any airport, preferably smaller, but any airport should do. DVT, Deer Valley, Phoenix. Oh, Mariggy. Who wants to read me this NUGM? And bonus points explain why I immediately noticed that it was important. Brett.
So runway 7 left, 25 right is closed except for crossing daily from 400 to 1300.
Indeed. What days?
Oh. I'm not sure. Oh, I guess it's from the 9th to the 13th.
Yeah. I wonder if they have that formatted correctly in. Yeah, so in ICAO format, this includes a separate D for the daily part. So they do actually format it correctly, which is neat. So the reason why I immediately noticed that this was important is because my eyes are scanning for closed. And specifically, they're scanning for runway closed. So, for example, taxiway closed doesn't really trigger my immediate note, but this does. Runway 07 left, 25 right closed except crossing from the 8th at 4 Zulu to the 8th at 13 Zulu. So, Brian.
When it says except crossing, that means like a plane that's on a taxiway or, crossing through the runway to get somewhere else. Is that what it refers to?
Yeah, I don't know if this will show up in my list of airports. It actually does, so we can look at the... Yeah, so there's hangars on either side. So if you are landing on one runway, you may have to cross the other runway to get to where you're going. So they are open to allowing crossing the runway, even when it's closed. It's also worth noting here that there is a 9-hour period where both of these runways... no, actually, never mind. Because this is from the 9th. This is on the 8th. So these are not going to be both closed at the same time. So it's just going to be one or the other. And then who wants to read me this NUGM here, this FDC NUGM? It's not relevant for our class, but these sorts of things are good practice. Peeker.
right, FTC Flight Data Center NOTAM 6784 in the 6th month at DVT Airport. IAP, Think Instrument Approach Procedure, Phoenix Deer Valley in Phoenix, Arizona. RNAV GPS runway 25 left. Not sure of Orage D, meaning LPV localizer performance, vertical guidance not authorized. So I think January 26th of this year, 13/14 through 9/7/26 at 13/14 estimated time.
Yeah. So find my mouse there. So RNAV GPS runway 25 left original D is that's the full name of the procedure. So this is the revision of the procedure, Orage D. So if you went and looked at that approach, you would reference down here in the corner. This is Orage D. And the reason why that's included is just in case if they issue a new chart and the NOTAM stays up, then you know it doesn't apply to your chart anymore. Especially because there's always a changeover period when they issue new charts. There's a changeover period where both of the charts are technically valid. It doesn't quite work that way. But where you could use either chart, basically. And so you could be using Origin E or Amendment 1 or something like that. I don't know how they do the revision numbers, but you could be using a different chart, and this one is still technically valid, so they still have the NOTAM up referring to it, but your chart isn't affected anymore. So that's why it refers to that. But yeah, this is saying that the LPV approach is not authorized. So these mins here, not authorized. These mins would be, if we could do them in this class, we can't, but. All right. So, I have a question. Do people need more practice on option 1? I have enough time to give practice on maybe 2 of these, maybe 1 of these. METARs, TAFs, PIREPs, winds and temps aloft, and ISA and calculating ISA deviation.
What was the last one you mentioned?
ISA and calculating ISA deviation. Okay. It's not helpful. So, when I go look at MCO here, the temperature is 11 degrees Celsius. I am pretty sure Orlando's at sea level, but we can go look just to make sure. 20-9, airport elevation 96 feet. Yeah, so that's pretty much sea level. So our ISA deviation, what is our standard temperature at sea level? Yeah. 15C is what we got in the chat. That's correct. So this would be ISA -4. If you're doing it on a performance chart, you'd round down, or actually you'd probably round up to, because up is more restrictive. So you'd round up to ISA +0 in that case, because I think we only have performance charts for ISA -5, ISA +0, ISA +5, etc. It's in increments of 5. So I think you'd round up to ISA +0 just to be safe. But yeah, that would be ISA -4 at sea level there. Let's do a slightly harder one. I don't think that's at a very high altitude. Fairly sure. Yeah, ORH is at 1,009 feet. And maybe one day it will actually show it to me. There we go. All right. So ORH is, wow, that's really good weather for Worcester. So slightly harder one. It's at 1,000 feet above sea level. Our temperature is -6 degrees Celsius. What is our ISA deviation going to be? I see one answer from Tatum in the chat. Do we agree with it? Disagree with it?
Did you say this is Worcester is 1,000 feet elevation?
Yeah, Worcester is 1,000 feet above sea level.
Okay.
So what would be our ISA temperature at that altitude? Yeah. All right. So we got some agreement in the chat there. Let's go over that one. So Worcester is, if we go to the chart here, we flip it so you can actually read the airport elevation. It is 1,009 feet. We'll call that 1,000. It's close enough. So at 1,000 feet, our ISA temperature is going to be 15 minus 2. So that's 13 degrees Celsius. Our actual temperature is -6. So the deviation is 19 degrees below ISA. So we are ISA minus 19. It's cold. Not overly surprising. It's Massachusetts in the winter. Alrighty. Let's go look at somewhere that might be a little more high altitude. Let's look at Denver for funsies. So Denver, we're going to pull up 10.9. 10.9 is the airport info chart, by the way. That should be discussed in more detail on Monday. But the 10.9 chart is where you're going to find the airport elevation. We have our airport elevation up in the top corner here, 5434. So put it in chat there. Temperature 7 degrees Celsius, altitude 5434. What is our ISA deviation? We can round it up to like 5,500, I think is fair. Yeah. So +3 is going to be correct because we have our altitude of, we're rounding it to 5,500, which is actually incorrect. We should round down, but whatever. So our altitude 5,500, because I said that, is going to be 15 degrees C minus 2 degrees per 1,000 feet. So 5,000 times 2, 10, plus 500 is going to be 1 degree. So minus 11. So 15 minus 11 is going to be 4 degrees. So 4 degrees C is going to be our ISA temperature. We are at 7 degrees, so that is 3 degrees above ISA. So ISA plus 3 is going to be our deviation. Let's do one more. Let's poke around for some fun stuff like Reno. Reno should be good. So 4415 will round down to 4,000 in this case. Temperature, actual temperature is 11C. What is our ISA deviation? Yeah, so ISA plus 4. Am I correct that you should round down? No, I'm going to correct myself for a second time. It should actually be rounded up, because if you have a lower ISA temperature, then your ISA deviation is going to be higher when it is hotter, and therefore you are more performance restricted. So, okay. Ignore what I said earlier about rounding down. You should round up. Rounding up is more performance restricting. So you should round the altitude up. I did that wrong. So actually it should be ISA plus 5. But yeah.
So would you round it to the nearest 500 then?
Yeah, 500 is fine, because that's 1 degree C. So you would round it up to the nearest 500. Because I was thinking that a higher ISA would be more restrictive, but actually a lower ISA is more restrictive because we are more likely to be above it, which is more restricting. Math is hard. All right, I'm just going to do one more just for the sake of making sure that we get it correct this time. I'm not going to do Salt Lake City. I'm going to do Provo because Provo seems more fun. All right, so 4497, rounding up to 4500 because I was wrong before. Temperature is 9 degrees Celsius. What is our ISA deviation? All right. We got a bunch of ISA plus 3s in the chat. Do we all agree with ISA plus 3? Seeing some people nod, seeing some people say agree, seeing some thumbs up. All right. So ISA plus 3 is indeed correct. All right. So yeah, you take the altitude, you round up to the nearest 500, and that's going to be your most restrictive. And I'm also meant to review FARs. I'm not sure what part of FARS I should review. Does anybody have any parts of the federal aviation regulations that you feel you did not fully understand? So I'll pull up everybody's favorite thing, Code of Federal Regulations, ECFR. So this is the part that we use the most in dispatch, subpart. So 14 CFR Part 121, Subpart U, dispatching and flight release rules. This is what we use the most in dispatch. Subpart U. So for domestic operations, no person may start a flight unless an aircraft dispatcher specifically authorizes that flight. That's called job security. For flag operations, same thing. For supplemental operations, basically the same thing, because under supplemental operations, you will be the person authorized by the operator to exercise operational control over the flight. Familiarity with weather conditions. No aircraft dispatcher may release a flight unless he is thoroughly familiar with reported and forecast weather conditions on the route to be flown. So we must be thoroughly familiar with the weather. How do we do that? We do that with what is called a weather brief, which we probably were supposed to do today and I forgot to do. So, oops. So we have to provide the pilot in command all available current reports or information on airport conditions and irregularities of navigation facilities that may affect the safety of the flight. So before beginning the flight, we have to provide them with all available weather reports and forecasts of weather phenomena that may affect the safety of the flight, including some specific examples. And during a flight, we shall provide any additional available information and irregularities of facilities and services that may affect the safety of the flight. So we have to keep alerting them of information. It's also worth noting that the beginning of a flight here is somewhat contentious. Most airlines define it as when the airplane pushes back from the gate with the intention of flight. The official definition is when the aircraft moves under its own power for the purposes of flight, which is defined elsewhere as defined for defining flight time for the crew members. But that's what most things use. Some airlines define it as when the aircraft takes off. SkyWest defines it as when the captain signs the release, because SkyWest has a really, really chill FAA inspector. They totally should not get away with that, but they do. So before beginning a flight, the pilot in command so this is for supplemental. The pilot in command is responsible for getting the weather information and facility information from you for supplemental operations. So you can't dispatch or release an airplane unless it is airworthy and is equipped as prescribed in 121.303. What's that? Let's go look. airplane instruments and equipment. So we have to have an airspeed indicator that is calibrated in knots. There's some other stuff. So basically, we have to have all of our required equipments for instrument flight and such. So we can't dispatch an airplane over an approved route or route segment unless the communication and navigation facilities are in satisfactory operating condition. Now, this does not usually apply when we are operating under RNAV in airline operations because we can utilize GPS to cover for any inoperative navigation equipment. When we are dispatching in this class, we are not using RNAV. Therefore, technically, you must understand that all of the en route navigational facilities are functional. So if somewhere in your NOTAM package for a flight that you do in either the in-person with the flight plans or on your practical includes that one of the VORs that you are using en route is not serviceable, you cannot use that airway or that VOR. I don't think that we include that on any of our practice flight plans. I don't think that will be on your practical, but it technically could come up. And if you ever dispatch a non-RNAV airplane in real life, that can come up. Trevor?
When you're doing the NOTAM search, are you able to plug in your whole route and pull up all of the NOTAMs for, say, potentially whatever VORs are NOTAMed out also, or do you have to do individual searches for all that?
I think so. Yeah, so you can search for a specific center that you are operating in, and that is where the NOTAMs will be filed. So in this case, we don't really have very many of them. We have a couple of them. So here we have Victor 38 between between a certain VORTAC and a intersection, not applicable except for aircraft equipped with suitable RNAV system with GPS. When you're dispatching in the real world, this will be in your briefing package that you can read. I'll be completely honest that not everyone actually reads that, but they should. Then there's stuff like restrictions that are noted on the charts are canceled. So yeah, you got your center NOTAMs. Center NOTAMs are where stuff like that is included.
So you're saying in real world, the computer is going to pull all of the relevant NOTAMs? And
Yes,
put
so
them-
the computer will pull all of the NOTAMs for the centers that you're flying through. And those will be included in your briefing package. So, no person may dispatch or release an aircraft for operations under IFR or over the top unless appropriate weather reports or forecasts or any combination thereof indicate that the weather conditions will be at or above the authorized minimums at the estimated time of arrival at the airport or airports to which dispatched or released. So it is worth noting, this is based on the authorized minimums to start the approach, not to successfully land from the approach, only to start the approach. That is why we base it on visibility only. That is the legal basis for that. That is how every airline that I'm aware of does it. You may, at some point in your career, encounter a captain who does not understand this. I have. It is always entertaining to try and argue with them. I would personally say, don't argue with them. Just get a chief pilot or duty pilot or someone like that on the line to explain how that works. But yes, we are dispatching to begin the approach. That is what it means by authorized minimums. That is the approved FAA interpretation of this. Extended over water, takeoff alternate. When do we need a takeoff alternate? Brian.
When the landing minimums at our departure airport are well, when we're currently below landing minimums at our departure airport.
Yes, that is correct. And what must the takeoff alternate fulfill? What criteria must it fulfill?
Let's see, it must. I want to say, well, first it must be within range and have appropriate fuel. I hope I'm not getting these confused. And have the facilities for taking care of the aircraft and passengers. Am I on the right track?
So we are, yeah, so it does have to be a suitable airport, but it is worth noting that it also has to be listed in the operations specifications to begin with, which inherently makes it suitable. Well, inherently makes it adequate. Suitability is depending on the weather. So you could be an adequate airport, but have weather that is unsuitable. That's the difference between, there's a lot of people that will define a adequate versus a suitable airport based on passenger handling. That is not actually correct. I had to look this up the other day. The correct answer to that question is that an adequate airport is defined based on its ability for the airplane to safely land, to have a runway that functions, an approach that functions, and winds that don't take us out of that approach or that runway. A suitable airport is that plus we meet our weather minimums. So in this case, we have to be a suitable airport. We have to meet our weather minimums. Specifically, we have to meet our alternate minimums. So that's what this means. The alternate airport weather conditions must meet the requirements of the certificate holder's operations specifications. Our operations specifications state that an alternate airport must meet the 1, 2, 3 rule. Or sorry, not the 1, 2, 3 rule, the 1 nav-aid or 2 nav-aid rule. Wrong word. The other condition that we must meet is that we must be not more than 1 hour from the departure airport at normal cruising speed in still air with 1 engine inoperative. So normally expressed as a distance, I don't know what that distance is for the CRJ.
Yeah, I think my problem is after completing the ADX, I think I may have dumped a little more from my brain than I should. I need to go back and review some of these.
That is why I am being asked to review this, I think. So alternate airport for destination. This is our 1, 2, 3 rule. 121.619 is our 1, 2, 3 rule. So must have an alternate airport. It also includes when the weather conditions forecast for the destination first alternate are marginal, at least one additional alternate must be designated. I don't remember how we define marginal for this class. It varies depending on the airline how marginal is defined. Marginal is not defined in the regulations. However, no alternate airport is required if for at least 1 hour before and 1 hour after the estimated time of arrival at the destination airport, the appropriate weather reports or forecasts or any combination of them indicate the ceiling will be at least 2,000 feet above the airport elevation and visibility will be at least 3 miles. It is worth noting appropriate weather reports or forecasts or any combination of them. This could be written to interpret it as saying that the METAR counts. That's not how it was intended to be written. That's not how it was intended to be read. There are countries that allow, and this is allowed under ICAO standards, for there to be forecast language in a METAR. In that particular case, you can consider that forecast language in the METAR. Otherwise, you should only use the TAF for this. And then the weather conditions must meet our alternate minimums. Alternate airport for flag is slightly different. It's slightly more complex than the 1, 2, 3 rule. And if the flag is more than 6 hours, we always require it. Supplemental is always required unless you are specifically approved for it. ETOPS, alternate, don't care. Yeah, alternate airport weather minimums, operations specifications. Okay, continuing flight in unsafe conditions. No pilot in command may allow a flight to continue toward any airport which it has been dispatched or released if, in the opinion of the pilot in command or dispatcher, the flight cannot be completed safely, unless, in the opinion of the pilot in command, there is no safer procedure. In that event, continuation towards that airport is an emergency situation. Worth noting, in the opinion of the pilot in command or dispatcher, you alone saying this operation is not safe, you need to divert, counts for this. You alone can determine that an aircraft needs to divert. The captain can still continue under his emergency authority, but it would be emergency authority. So we can't take off with broken stuff unless we have an MEL. And the MEL has to meet all of the criteria that an MEL has to meet. Operation in icing conditions. No person may dispatch or release an aircraft, continue to operate an aircraft en route, or land an aircraft when, in the opinion of the pilot in command or aircraft dispatcher, icing conditions are expected or met that might adversely affect the safety of the flight. This is actually a surprisingly important regulation in actual dispatch circumstances. And I'm going to explain why. So there will be situations where you are provided with an aircraft that has its anti-icing systems inoperative. You cannot operate that aircraft into icing conditions. However, icing conditions are difficult to forecast, and you can get into situations where you are maybe legal or maybe not legal. If you can say that you expect icing conditions to exist, in that case, you are not legal to go. Even if you don't have anything that explicitly says the icing condition will definitely exist, if you expect it to exist, you can't go. This is a regulation that I have had to refer to at least once in the real world to defend against some pressure I was receiving to dispatch a flight. That does happen. It shouldn't happen, but it does happen. So other things, we can't take off when frost, ice, or snow is adhering to the wings. We cannot Arian.
Just a quick question on the icing. How is there any time frame that you were expecting that you can avoid, or is there means like whether you can dispatch or not? Is there any like a time limit?
What do you mean?
For example, we said expect when you see that expecting, even though it does not exist at this moment in time, but you can expect. But there isn't a duration, like how long is it the entire flight time they're expecting? Let's say it's a 5-hour leg, and you're expecting the icing to be in that 5 hours. Is that how you kind of like go by?
I mean, if the aircraft is not icing capable, then we cannot encounter icing at any point during the route of flight. We cannot fly in icing conditions whatsoever. It doesn't matter how long it takes for us to get through the icing conditions. It doesn't matter, like if we would punch through those icing conditions in 5 seconds, it doesn't matter. We can't go through it at all. So, and if the flight's 5 hours long, that just makes forecasting the icing conditions more difficult and would make the margin of error that you require to be sure that there are no icing conditions even larger.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So, de-icing on the ground, you'll talk about when you get to an airline. They'll teach you all that you need to know about that. All you need to know here is that we de-ice the aircraft with type 1 fluid, orange, and then if necessary, and that's applied heated, and then if necessary, we anti-ice the aircraft with type 4 fluid, which is green. And that sort of sticks to the aircraft and provides what's called a holdover time, during which we can tolerate precipitation coming down on the aircraft and then take off. If we exceed that holdover time, then we have to go back for more de-icing and anti-icing. Different fluids have different holdover times. Different fluids are better for different circumstances. Some are better in cold temperatures. Some are better in slightly warmer temperatures. Some are better at being diluted than others. So there's lots of different fluids. Takeoffs from unlisted airports, if you have to do that, that's a fun situation. Please don't get yourself in that situation. Fuel supply, all domestic operations, we must have fuel to fly to the airport to which we have dispatched the flight. Thereafter, fuel to fly to and land at the most distant alternate where required. and thereafter to fly for 45 minutes at normal cruising fuel consumption. So that is our required fuel under the regulations. Burn alternate reserve, BAR. That is our required fuel under the regulations. Now, there is a separate concept called MINTO, the minimum fuel required for takeoff. That number is on your dispatch release. If you add additional fuel that you require for holding or other reasons, and it will be burned when the flight is airborne, that goes into your MINTO, even though it is not required by regulation. Fuel supply, factors for computing fuel required. So this is where it says that that fuel is required. So the factors for computing fuel, we remember this as WAN, because pilots are always whining, WAN, I want more fuel. Wind and other weather, anticipated traffic delays, and instrument approach and possible missed approach, any other conditions that may delay landing of the aircraft. And all of that fuel is required. So any fuel that you add for those reasons is required and goes into your MINTO, minimum fuel for takeoff. Even though it is not explicitly required under your BAR, it is still required fuel that must be on the aircraft prior to takeoff. So here is the other part of how we base our dispatch on beginning an approach. So except as provided in paragraphs D and E of this section, no pilot may continue approach past the final approach fix, or where a final approach fix is not used, begin the final approach segment of an instrument approach procedure at any airport, unless there's a weather report at airports within the US, unless the latest weather report reports the visibility to be more equal to or more than the visibility minimums prescribed for that procedure. So there's additional tidbits here. Basically, we can't go below the decision altitude. So this is the bit where we refer to high minimums captains. You can also call them baby captains, but don't call them that to their face. So how much do we increase the minimums by for a high mins captain? Alan.
Half a static mile and 100-foot ceiling.
That is correct. 100.5. And the other bit is, in no event may the landing minimums be less than 301. So there are circumstances where the RVR can be reduced below, like, to 1,800 feet. When you add the when you do it for a high minimums captain, you cannot do that. You cannot reduce it below 2,400. So you have to go up to 4,200 for a high men's captain, if I recall correctly, or 4,000 or whatever it is for a mile via in under RVR. I forget what it is exactly. So that's our high men's captain. Anything else here? You shall sign the release only if you believe that the flight can be made with safety. The aircraft dispatcher may delegate authority to sign a release for a particular flight, but cannot delegate his authority to dispatch. So, you know, you can have a trainee sign the release. Their name can be on it, but it is still you that is responsible. So I'm going to call it there for today. So we got, I'm going to stick around for up to 15 minutes or until everyone is gone for additional discussion. But y'all can head out. We're done for tonight. Thank you all so much for being here. And I'll see you all later in this class.
Thank you, Andy.
You're welcome.